This podcast has been brought to you with the help of Mr. Edward Rowe, Miss Tracy Lott, and Mr. Alejandro Shilita. Special thanks to Mr. John Greenberg, a social studies teacher in the Seattle School District, who has inspired me and many other students to take action in their communities and speak out against injustice. The guiding question we're going to be exploring in this podcast is, are members of the U.S. military offered adequate mental health support during and after their service? And what changes can we make to improve the quality of life for veterans? A statistic which reflects the gravity of this issue is from an article by NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, which states an average of 20 veterans die by suicide each day. To start us off, here's an interview with Mr. Edward Rowe, the college advisor at Center School. So what was your position in the military?
Good question. My position in the military, I was an HVAC technician, which that is a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning.
Do you feel that the U.S. provided adequate mental health care during service?
During my service, well, to be honest, when I was deployed in Afghanistan and when I came back home, there wasn't really much of a service for mental health unless if you advocate for it or unless if you had any sort of encounters that you've just faced once you can come back home. So for me personally, no.
Did the U.S. provide adequate mental health care after your service?
I remember when I was there and when I came back home, I remember one of the individual that, was asking for it. And when I, just out of the blue, I just got a call from him. He said, it wasn't really much of a help from their side. And it must be probably because of, staff shortages over there, not much of a mental health trained professionals. So it could be maybe something that's lacking at most.
What do you think the U.S. government could do better to support veterans and soldiers during their service?
Well, that's a really good question. In my opinion, I guess increase of, highly trained mental health, professionals. That's the key thing. I wish that the VA has something for that and kind of reduce barriers to care and to educate veterans on, the things about treatment and expanding like high quality treatment as well. Let's see. I guess probably improving and monitoring and performance measurements as well too, and just to see if they have improved or anything, and maybe continue to develop and more tests or new models of care for our veterans.
Do you think the VA provides sufficient mental health support to veterans? And is it equally available to all veterans?
That's a really good question. Not too sure on the answer. However, it really depends as well too on the military members who are serving and their positions as well. Let's just say, for an example, if it's a combat veteran, and a lot of veterans who are in combat, they're either probably have a lot of mental health going on, and not only that, like far way back then, like when 9/11 happened too, there's a lot of homeless individuals who were veterans, and that they weren't being treated as they should be. And that is something that questions us all. Is it also because of military jobs that we're choosing while we're in our service, and how we get out of service? Is there a big impact of that reason? I'm not too sure, actually. Maybe. When I was an HVAC technician, I got my certification and everything and got out, done my service, did my tour, and then didn't really have much to do with, a treatment at the VA or nothing, unless if I advocate that I do have PTSD or any of the mental health trauma that I've been dealing with. No, but if it was, let's just say, a combat veteran who've done a lot of tours and came back home and experiencing a lot of traumas and not really having treatment, I think it might be because they're not really self-advocating for that reason. Maybe. I'm not too sure. But I think it could be that reason why. So, yeah.
Is there any additional information you have insight on?
Right, I do actually. When they see, well, not see, when they like hear about military coming back home from war or coming back home for any deployment, it's not just about PTSD. That's like a small portion of percentage, like maybe 20%. The rest could be when they come back home, maybe dealing with depression, traumatic injury, brain injuries, maybe, or maybe like alcohol issues that they have probably been dealing with, family issues, because they're trying to adjust civilian life when they're so badly focused on the routine of what military life is like. And not only that, feeling just anger, doubts. That's something that I've encountered a lot more than just PTSD. So for me, when I was there in my service, I wasn't really much of a drinker, but I was much of a more person that can't really adjust a lot in the civilian life. Because I every day I wake up literally 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. I do my daily routine of working out, and then there has to be that routine that I have to deal with. And then whenever I'm here in the civilian side, I mean, it's like that freedom. Like you can do whatever you want. So that's something that I've realized the difficulty when we're coming back home as a civilian. I mean, it's just adjusting. Exactly. I agree. So that's pretty much it.
Next, we have an interview with Tracy Lott, the administrative secretary at Center School. What was your position in the military?
My position was a legal secretary.
What do you think the U.S. could do better to support veterans with their mental health care?
They definitely need more doctors, and they need to make it easier for veterans to get appointments, because sometimes it could be up to a year before you see anyone because they're so backlogged.
Do you think the VA, the Veterans Association, provides sufficient mental health services to veterans? And is it equally available to all veterans?
It is there, but it's hard to get through the bureaucracy of getting an appointment, also finding a facility that offers that type of assistance in the area in which you live, because not everyone lives in the metropolitan area. So if you are living in a rural area, I would imagine the closest city would be maybe 100 miles away from you, and then you also have to wait in order to get an appointment.
Again, I want to thank Ms. Tracy and Mr. Rowe for their time and insight. Now, here's the interview with Mr. Shilletta. What was your position in the military?
So during my time in active duty, I was a KC-135 boom operator, so I participated in flight refueling operations.
Do you feel that the U.S. provided adequate mental health support during your service?
I would have to say yes. While I never took advantage of mental health services while I was in the military, I know that we were briefed that if we did need to talk to somebody, that would always be available to us. But I guess on the other side of that, while the services were made available to us, I still felt there was a certain stigma around mental health that was difficult to overcome. And, I know this was 20 years ago and things have changed since then, but I still feel that if you were open and you did want to see somebody because you were struggling with stuff, it was generally considered to be less manly. You were considered to be weak or frail, that you couldn't handle your own business, so to speak. So gladly that kind of sentiment is turning around, but I still felt that when I was in the military, those kind of those inaccurate opinions, those perceptions of seeking mental health services still were very predominant.
What do you think the U.S. government could do better to support veterans and soldiers during their service?
I think they could probably do a better job of identifying and treating soldiers that are struggling. maybe roll out a campaign just to let them know that there are services available for them. Because here's the thing. Now, I don't want to necessarily unfairly criticize, because I don't necessarily have firsthand information how the modern military deals with mental illnesses. But what I do know is that many service members, particularly combat vets, do commit suicide, right? And that's still a huge problem that needs to be addressed, right? So if you were asking me if they can do more, based on the numbers of veterans that typically commit suicide, I said yes, of course they could do more, right? So maybe once again, just do a better job of outreach, identifying, and providing services for those troops that need it.
To summarize, although the United States does offer mental health care through the Veterans Association to members of the military, there are a variety of factors which limits one's ability to access these resources. Examples of these factors include the social stigma around needing mental health support, needing to advocate for yourself significantly when it's quite challenging to do so for many people, a lack of mental health professionals in the military, having to wait a long time to get appointments, and not having access to a VA facility if you don't live near one. Some solutions to these issues would be to hire more mental health professionals for active soldiers to have access to educate soldiers during and after their service about the resources that are available to them, to check up on veterans regularly who are receiving care to make sure they're getting the support they need, creating more VA facilities in rural areas so all veterans can have access to them, in working to reduce the stigma around needing mental health care. Thank you for listening.